I absolutely love the original Hellraiser. To me, it's always been a very special and important film. I also love Hellraiser 2, I love the original novella, The Hellbound Heart, and I love just about everything that its writer, the phenomenally talented Clive Barker, has ever done. Naturally, everyone's got their own history with Hellraiser, both the original film and the franchise itself. So of course, approaching a new Hellraiser film, you can get kind of trepidatious. You spend months thinking about it, reading little bits, looking at pictures, reading interviews, and to be honest, that's a lot of stewing, to the point that you begin to think that it's going to be hard for any film to ever live up to this amount of anticipation. So, 2022's Hellraiser, which is one of those films that just calls a spade and doesn't even try and think up a new title for itself, comes to us from director David Bruckner, who made The Ritual and The Night House, which I know a lot of people liked. And it's interesting because throughout that whole build-up, there was a lot of talk about, is this a remake? Is it going back and doing The Hellbound Heart again but more faithfully? Is it a standalone? Does it take place in the same world as the original? And there seemed to be a lot of back and forth about exactly what kind of a Hellraiser film we were going to get. And so what we do get isn't at all a remake of The Hellbound Heart or the original film, but it's a totally new, totally different version of the Hellraiser world and mythology. A brand new story that picks out key ideas and concepts from previous versions and knits them together into this twisted new take that succeeds in breathing a new life into Clive Barker's visionary original without ever feeling like it's just copying what's already been. We follow our lead character Riley, played by Odessa Azion, who is a recovering addict who's kind of having trouble getting her life back together. In an effort to make some money, she breaks into a storage terminal where she steals a familiar looking artifact that once belonged to this hedonistic billionaire with more than his fair share of skeletons in the closet. After she's taken the box, Riley then begins to experience strange and terrifying visions, followed by the troubling disappearance of her brother Matt, which she's convinced she has somehow brought about. On a quest for answers about the box, Riley soon gets caught up in a familiar world of terrifying Faustian pacts, blood-hungry demons, and a string of terrible moral decisions which she'll be forced to make in order to achieve her heart's desire. So I think the first thing to say is this. I know the temptation is to compare every intricate little detail of the film to the original to see how it shapes up, but I'm going to try and avoid doing that as much as possible, because I think that this is one of those films that's really genuinely trying very hard to be its own thing. It wisely doesn't try and just do the same thing that Clive Barker is doing with both his film and his original novella, but instead it demonstrates a crucial understanding of the key elements of that world and that mythology to enable it to take the ideas that were present in the original and to expand them out into this hugely ambitious epic that never once feels like it's just rehashing stuff cynically to make money. Instead, it's a film that's reverent to the point of being awestruck by the sheer imaginative power of Barker's world, whilst also understanding just how important a gig this is, and how important that Hellraiser world is to the fans that have embraced its unique mix of Faustian human drama and existential cosmic horror. There's a real sense of freshness here, like we're finally getting a chance to see this franchise grow up into this big, beautifully polished epic where the scope of the storytelling is no longer hampered by budget constraints, and you suddenly realise just how much untapped potential there's always been in that world of Hellraiser that's never quite made its way to the screen. So, what David Bruckner is doing with this latest chapter in the Hellraiser saga is that he's telling a story about the usual Hellraiser themes of temptation and obsession, by drawing parallels between our lead character Riley's addiction and her self-destructive behaviours with the ritualistic sacrifices that the puzzle box is demanding of her as a toll. Riley isn't seeking pleasure or power like so many have toyed with the box before her, but instead she's motivated by essentially noble impulses to repair the damage that she's done both to herself and to the people that she loves. What's interesting, therefore, is that because we've got a far more moral, if still incredibly flawed heroine at the heart of the story, it enables the transformation of the Cenobites into becoming a far more actively malevolent presence. They become these pure creatures of nightmare who are actively seeking to lure and to corrupt our protagonists. Because the good news is that we get a ton of really fantastically well done Cenobite action, and that David Bruckner has taken all the brilliant fantastical elements of the Hellraiser lore and he puts them at the very forefront of this film, Because after so many sequels in which Pinhead and his gang turn up for a quick bit of moralising at the end of some fairly generic horror film, we finally got a Hellraiser that totally understands that really we're here to see the Cenobites in action, being cool and being scary and being sexy. Because there's no other franchise that's got anything that even comes close to being as brilliant as the Cenobites to play with, and David Bruckner totally gets how important it is to do them right. But what's great is that this Hellraiser is a fantastic horror blockbuster that puts all its money on the screen in the best possible way, to dazzle and to wow and to beguile its audience. It looks absolutely beautiful, from the design of its elaborate sets and props and its arcane objects to the look of this new breed of ultra-deadly Cenobite. Every single frame of this Hellraiser just absolutely drips with menace and threat, and I love just how deadly serious the whole film is, which helps really build up how powerful and terrifying the Cenobites are, and how much bigger and more cosmic their whole trans-dimensional world actually is. It's also a film that really opens out the world of Hellraiser without just having characters standing around explaining the mythology. It suggests that there's far more at play here, that these Cenobites are far more complex than any that we've ever seen before, and that there's a much more layered mythology to the puzzle box itself. One of the things that works best about this retooling of the Cenobites for me, that I'm not going to spoil here, is the idea that the mythology that we're at first presented with is really just a cover for something else. If you've ever had trouble reconciling some of the ideas in the original films about who opens the box and why, and what you actually get when you do open the box, this film lays out the whole process in a way that follows a much smoother and more satisfying logical set of rules. Its effects are, of course, absolutely perfect, unapologetically gory and nasty when they need to be, but there's also, as there should be, a lot more than just characters being brutally eviscerated. Most of the best moments in this film don't culminate in huge, bloody, gory kills, because that would be too easy. For horror fans, gory kills are just a moment of fun, gooey catharsis. The real horror of the Cenobites is looking at what they've done to their own bodies and realising that that's going to happen to you. There's something that's so wonderfully existentially terrifying about them, especially in their new leather-free incarnation, slowly closing in inevitably on their prey, knowing that there's nothing you can do to escape them. It's amazing how Clive Barker's creations have just been subtly tweaked here in a way that's managed to invest them with a new sense of freshness and immediacy. And finally, after all these years, the Cenobites are just really terrifying again. And whilst I won't get massively bogged down talking about our new Pinhead, what I will say is that I think that her new appearance means that she gets away with being the kind of beguiling voice of temptation in a way that I'm not entirely sure would have worked with a male version of the character. It's not just a change that's made for its own sake, I'm convinced, but one that makes sense in the context of what the character's actually being asked to do. However, we do get one especially memorable character-defining moment that I just need to bring up, which involves our new Pinhead sticking one of her head pins into the throat of one of her victims. It's an absolutely perfect, quintessentially Hellraiser-esque moment, not because it is just a bit of showy nastiness, but because, more than any other scene of the Cenobites in action that we've ever had, it captures perfectly the spirit of what those characters are all about. Pinhead doesn't taunt her captive with the threat of an eternity of torture, but instead speaks about the transcendent joy of embracing pain as a gateway to pleasures that are totally alien to the human form. Now, if there's one scene that single-handedly convinces you that this is real, properly kinky Hellraiser, then it's this one. The last thing to mention is, of course, the wonderful new soundtrack, courtesy of Mr. Ben Lovett. Now, music has always been a vital part of the success of Hellraiser, so I'm glad to say that Ben Lovett's new Hellraiser score is brilliant. Like the film itself, it avoids just trying to do exactly the same things that the 1987 version did, and instead it goes for a much quieter and more elegant approach, while still fundamentally being able to convey musically the whole palette of ideas that Hellraiser is playing with darkly hypnotic doomed melodies and sweeping fatalistic love themes. And every now and then you'll hear a section of Lovett's score slowly melt away to reveal a beautifully restaged Christopher Young cue. Of course, the original Hellraiser's music is too perfect to ever be superseded, but Lovett quotes Christopher Young sparingly and always to fantastic effect. Just all in all, I think David Bruckner has taken something that's beloved to many, myself included, and he's made a film that totally delivers on sheer spectacle, on its gorgeous visuals, and with an understanding of the ideas at the core of Clive Barker's story without just simply rehashing those ideas. And they're ideas that thankfully haven't been compromised in order to be fitted into a more mainstream, big-budget Hellraiser film. One of my biggest fears about this film going in was that the core ideas of Hellraiser about the joys of suffering and the pursuit of experience are ideas that are intrinsically difficult to sell to a mainstream crowd, which is why Hellraiser is pretty much the last of the greats to have been remade in a bigger budgeted form, and therefore the concern is that a glossy revamp would bin everything that's interesting about the franchise in favour of meaningless kills and gore. Well, thankfully, that's not the case. This is still pure essence of Hellraiser, a parallel film to the original that I think is going to click for a whole new audience, as well as to satisfy those like me who adore Barker's original, because fundamentally it's just a brilliant film in its own right that never tries to drag in things that don't belong in this world, or to downplay just how singular and awe-inspiring that world can be. It's a film that's out to dazzle you and to beguile you, that transforms Clive Barker's ideas into an entire sprawling modern mythology, a backdrop of sweeping, majestic cosmic horrors and human corruption and dark, twisted desires. But is also a sharp, super tight bit of perfectly structured, expertly paced, adrenaline-fueled horror cinema that rises to truly dizzying heights and takes the franchise further than it's ever been before, without once showing the slightest lack of confidence in what it's doing. It's not just one of the best and most ambitious films in the Hellraiser franchise, it's simply one of the best horror films that I've seen in a long time, full stop. I mean, David Bruckner's Hellraiser absolutely blew me away. I will be watching it again many times in the future, during which time my opinions on it will no doubt mature and become more moderate. Or maybe they won't. But for someone who's waited years for this, who's never had a great Hellraiser film made in his lifetime, but who's always loved the franchise, maybe more than I do any other horror franchise to be honest, who went in terrified that this was gonna suck, and who was expecting so much from this that I knew it almost certainly could not live up to the expectations that I had going in, fuck it. For now at least, I'm giving it a solid 10 out of 10. It's everything that I could have hoped for and then some, and you don't know how good it feels to finally get a chance to say that.